by this bill and by what these amendments do, if you are forcing a trans child to go through puberty when they are trans, that is tantamount to torture. If you vote yes on this bill and yes on these amendments, I hope the next time there's an invocation, when you bow your heads in prayer, you see the blood on your hands.
Those were the words that got Montana's first transgender lawmaker censured from speaking on any bills in the legislative body until she apologizes for the statements that she made there. That was Representative Zooey Zephyr speaking out against amendments to State Senate Bill 99, which would ban gender-affirming care for minors. Just a few details about the bill before we move on to the censure itself. The bill would ban transgender minors from receiving gender-affirming care in the form of puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, or surgical procedures. Any medical professionals who provided such care would lose their medical licenses for at least a year. Those same treatments, however, would not be banned for non-transgender minors. So regardless of where you stand on this, you should have a clear thought on what is happening to Representative Zephyr here. We'll get to that in just a second, but before we do, Cenk, any thoughts?
Yeah, so a couple of things. Number one, when it comes to why is she saying that? The puberty blockers, the cross-sex hormones, etc. There are doctors and studies that say that if you kids, some people that are under 18 don't have access to that, that it leads to more suicides. So it endangers their life. That's why she's talking about blood on their hands. Now for me, that's the decision for the parents, the kids, and the doctors, okay? That's their business, and I'm not gonna get in there and go, no, I think the parents are wrong. I should decide. The government should decide instead of the parents, right? So that's the essence of her argument. Her argument that people are literally dying because of the suicides is a perfectly valid argument. They don't like the way that she stated it because it makes them uncomfortable. Ooh, now that's the thing I have a lot more comments on in a second, but Anna.
So she hurt Republican lawmakers' feelings by saying that they would have blood on their hands.
Yeah.
And so rather than engage in a debate on this, they decided, no, we're gonna punish her and we're going to censure her until she apologizes. So she will not be allowed to speak on any legislation whatsoever until we get the apology. So later that night, a group of state Republicans known as the Montana Freedom Caucus, I'm guessing they're similar to the Freedom Caucus that Republicans have in the House of Representatives.
And are completely against freedom.
Exactly. They demanded her censure in a letter and a tweet. They also misgendered her, by the way, several times. So they write, our caucus is calling for the immediate censure of transgender representative Zooey Zephyr after, and you can see that they misgendered her, threatening and deeply concerning comments on the House floor earlier today. Okay.
So a couple of things about that. Number one, they're like, oh, you think that trans people are getting wiped out. Well, we're gonna refer to you by your dead name and try to wipe out your identity today. Thanks for proving our point. Okay, so now to the most, well, all these issues are very important, but to the most ironic issue, let's put it that way. So the Republicans say, now remember, this is the Freedom Caucus, and we're writing you a letter to make sure you take her freedom away. She's not even allowed to speak, even though she's a representative in that state.
Yeah, so essentially, not only is she being silenced, but her constituents are being silenced.
100%. And so what part of that is freedom of speech? What part of that is freedom? So look, guys, again, this is what I say about Republicans all the time. Just own who you are, right? So you're not in favor of freedom. If someone disagrees with you, you want to shut them down immediately. Literally don't allow them to speak. By the way, this is not on the Republican voters, this part I'm about to say. It's on the Republican legislators. But your legislators also say, by the way, corporations are allowed to spend millions of dollars giving it to those greasy, corrupt politicians, because that's freedom of speech. But when an actual representative is trying to speak in the legislature, they're like, no, we don't want your freedom of speech. So humans are not allowed freedom of speech, but corporations are, in the form of money and bribes that they give to these crooks, right? So Republicans, just admit you don't like freedom of speech if it offends your feelings. Your feelings are more important to you. So don't run on that crap, okay? Because you're all liars. So let's just get that out of the way, okay? And second of all, like this whole idea of decorum to me is disgusting.
Yeah, and you know what? To be fair to you, you're very consistent on this, right? So this, I couldn't help but think back on a story we covered last week where Marjorie Greene in the House of Representatives was censured because of her conduct during a House hearing. You know, she accused Alejandro Mayorkas, the head of the Department of Homeland Security, of being a liar. I didn't really have much of a problem on that. And then she like really hit below the belt when she accused Eric Swalwell of having a sexual relationship with a Chinese spy, which he denies up and down. I was like, it's just, you're going a little too far, right? But no, I think you were right. I think the issues, the concerns about decorum, I think end up hindering necessary debates.
Yeah, look, as a progressive, I'm not remotely concerned about Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert speaking in Congress. I would never ban them. Like, I remember when they took Marjorie Taylor Greene off the committees. Yeah, she said outrageous things about Jewish space lasers, etc. I get that you want to sanction her in some way, but I don't really care if she's on a committee. Yeah. And I don't care if she speaks out in Congress because she almost always makes a fool of herself.
True.
Every time she speaks, we win. So if you're really convinced of your position and you think, oh my God, the country probably, or Montana hates trans people and hates people who say things that like politicians aren't honorable, then let her speak and then she'll be really unpopular and you'll win. Or are you worried that she's right and if people hear what she's saying, they won't like you guys? Because that certainly seems like what the reality is. So I'm not in favor of this kind of censorship, whether it's Democrats or Republicans. It's a terrible idea for democracy. And for the side doing the censoring, you're basically admitting defeat. You're saying, I can't beat your ideas in an open battle of ideas. I'm just gonna surrender and just put duct tape over your mouth and give up on the idea of freedom of speech. Because I can't match your speech. You're obviously better than I am.
Now they would respond by saying, well, we just wanted her to apologize and she refuses to do it. What would you
Why the hell would I apologize to you guys who have blood on your hands? Why would I do that? And in the Marjorie Taylor Greene case, all of Washington was so upset with her. They're like, can you believe she called a government official a liar?
Yeah, who cares?
Yes, I can believe that. That's the one thing that she's actually right about. Not about necessarily about Mayorkas, but honestly, has Mayorkas lied about things? Probably, right? They all lie. The idea that you're pretending to be outraged by that is, you guys look ridiculous to the rest of the country. And so these so-called tough guys in Montana doing the same thing. Oh, we're part of the Montana Freedom Caucus, okay? Oh, she said something about us, oh my God. Shut her up, what if people find out? A bunch of losers. Why don't you fight for your side instead of doing this nonsense crap? Because you know you're not right, you know it. Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.